Hello, and welcome to Kintsugi Coffee and Conversation, where we talk about all things Kintsugi. We're here once again with Dr. Jeff Teo. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, Jerry. It's great to have you again and be with our audience and listeners and viewers. Looking forward to this morning. And I know that there is a lot of things still to talk about as far as Kintsugi is concerned. So maybe just want to let our viewers know that this is a continuation of what we had last time. We talk about Kintsugi um, in relationship with the work of our clinical chaplains, but also the impact and the formation that they have experienced that could be translated into something that the general public can use. Right, Jerry?
Absolutely, absolutely. And to start things this morning, uh, I wanted to revisit something that we touched on last time, and and that is how Kintsugi can be considered the next step in one's chaplain journey. Um, am I understanding that right? Can you elaborate a little?
Sure. Before focusing on the chaplain's journey, I just want to cast a sort of a vision of what we would like to see in our community. Our community is not only composed of the wounded healers, if you may, as what we love to call ourselves as chaplains. We would like to see in our Kintsugi community um, a place where the seekers and the wounded healers have an intimate intersection and connection. We have a small community, and I hope it will become bigger as we open it to the general public. We have communities of wounded healers, the chaplains, and other practitioners in this field, and we do have members and guests in our community, those who are seeking, those who are in crisis and looking for a healing experience. The good thing about the metaphor that we're using, uh, Kintsugi resilience practitioners, especially clinically trained chaplains, are very much aware that this is not a hierarchical relationship as far as helper helpee relationship is concerned. Our clinical chaplains, they are quite aware that their brokenness and the healing experience that they have in this process is a great resource in allowing the healing and the transformational experience that you, a person in crisis, might experience in this process. The next step that I would like to share with you as far as our chaplains and those who would be um, helping us in this endeavor, the chaplains would take the next step is first experience the whole kintsugi process. Um, we have 7 booklets that would prepare you to and allow you to experience the healing process that a chaplain himself or herself would experience. By the way, just want to let you know, um, one of the most broken people in the world are not those who are identified as um, helpies or people who are being served by the ministers or chaplains out there. I just want to let you know the chaplains, the clergy, the pastors, ministers, um, you just don't see them, you just don't know what's going on inside them, but they are also human beings experiencing the struggles that they have. And maybe um, the, the most one of the most broken individuals, because if you're broken, it is quite natural for you to find a place where you could hide your brokenness. And ministry is one of the best place to hide one's brokenness. And the beauty that I saw in the CPE process, or clinical pastoral education, as a CPE supervisor, is when a clergy or a chaplain, a trainee, finally opens up and allow others to discover um, what's lying beneath the masks that we wear, and by sharing and experiencing the communion with others, with fellow wounded healers as we journey together, that's when the healing and transformation happens. So, what we're offering here, the next step for our chaplains, is not just to deliver pastoral care, is to understand deeper the process that we experience in CPE, in clinical pastoral education. It is not just an educational tool, it's a formational experience. So if we can package this and master the process and master the delivery, then the CP experience can finally be experienced by the community at large. So the next step for Kintsugi process, if you are clinically trained chaplains, if you have either board certified chaplains or a number of CPE units under your belt, and if you think that you can, aside from holding a space and being there for those who are in crisis, which we are very good in doing that because of our clinical training, taking it to the next level is um, learning how to create a space, the time and space, the intersecting time and space that you have experienced in CPE. You can now finally package that, deliver that, and make use of that experience with others as Kintsugi Resilience Master. We have several training in or practice if you may, from CCC, Community Care Chaplains um, perspective, we have three different kinds of levels as far as training Kintsugi chaplains is concerned. The first one is if you are a chaplain who would like to have a longer relationship with those that you are helping or ministering to, one-on-one on one-on-one basis. The the CPE supervision could be a good reference here, one-on-one CPE supervision. Now you can be trained on how to hold the space and have a longer relationship, allowing Kintsugi process to happen as a one-on-one um, a practitioner or someone who could deliver support and supervision, if you may, or mentoring to someone who is in crisis. And also we have, after that, those who like to um, continue and advance their training. And if you can see yourself facilitating a group of people who are, in crisis, it could be, a group of divorced individuals, a group of AA people, a group of grieving people, and you'd like to use Kintsugi process as a tool in your practice, there is also a continuing training for that. And finally, for clinically trained chaplains who are gifted in training other chaplains, we want you to join us in training other chaplains, and becoming what we call Kintsugi Resilience Masters. Um, and by doing that, I believe that more clinically trained chaplains can be agent of healing and hope using this process that we've been introducing to the community.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for clarifying. Um, that's a I would say a comprehensive set of uh, goals for someone who might be considering Kintsugi. Um, something you said a moment ago caught my attention, and that is the word formation. You used that, you have used that a lot. Um, can you tell us what you mean by formational as opposed to, say, an academic approach to, to this learning process?
That's right, Jerry. I took this quite seriously when I realized that we've been getting uh, CPE candidates and applicants from different seminaries and universities, and even denominations, um, you know, churches, pastors, and they were sending students to our center not because they want them to become chaplains. They were sending people our way because they believe that we can provide a specific aspect that they don't have in their own system, in their own agency and university or um, seminary, and that is formation. So those who are training to be chaplains in our program are not necessarily hoping to become chaplains someday. They were doing the work and learning because they know that a very essential part of their process becoming a minister is can be found in clinical pastoral education, which is what we call pastoral formation. What includes in pastoral formation, number one, is self awareness, knowing who you are, having the awareness on how to make use of yourself as a resource, and also identifying yourself as a hindrance in delivering care for others. Now, in that process, that's not just, that's just part of the layers here. Because when you encounter oneself, and many of our trainees were blown away as they encounter themselves. Encountering oneself includes some of the brokenness and trauma that you have experienced growing up, and the lens that you have formed that distorts how you see yourself, the world, and others. Encountering this distortion, encountering this belief about self and others is a big piece of healing and increasing self-awareness. So this is the kind of formation that we took seriously, and we'd like our trainees to have a clear understanding of their own woundedness and brokenness. That's why with that commitment, we would like the community to experience that process as well, because we are not the only ones broken and wounded here. People, every single one of us, we have our own story of woundedness and brokenness and trauma, but we tend to hide behind our own roles, our own duties, responsibilities, and even virtues. And because of that, we tend to forget that we are also wounded.
We
And
do, we do hide behind masks, that's for sure. Um, you mentioned making use of self. Self-awareness is extremely important, and I guess sometimes we don't realize that. Sometimes we enter the field of helping others, of coming alongside others, as I like to say. We enter that field with the understanding that all I have to do is learn what to say and what to do, and to reach into my back pocket and pull out my little bag o' tools to um, to start the healing process. But we often do forget, or perhaps even on purpose, hide our own woundedness or hide behind a mask, and in this way, it's possible to say of a person and his healing. And so I am just wondering. If you can give us a little greater understanding of how making use of self is so important in this field.
Yeah. First, before you can have a good sense, a healthy sense on how to make use of self, you have to encounter self and know self and embrace self in the process. Um, the One of the most difficult thing to embrace, or a person to embrace, is oneself. That's why it's quite natural to hide behind a mask or a role. I was sharing, with you earlier that pastors, or the role of a pastor, the role of a minister, is is quite a natural mask for many wounded individuals because ministry is filled with wonderful virtue and the virtues that you can choose to hide or hide yourself behind it. For example, if you are wounded and your woundedness is in the realm of sense of worth and identity, meaning if you look at yourself in the mirror, the only thing you see is your flaws. There are many people out there who could not just see themselves in the mirror without being sometimes even being disgusted, or seeing how worthless they are. So where will they? And this is a product of their trauma or brokenness or woundedness. After experiencing those pain, they embrace a particular lens that says, you know, you're nothing, you're worthless. So if they see themselves in the mirror and they cannot get healthy information about self, where do they go? They would rather use a new mirror, for example, the set of eyes from others. What if they could put smile on these eyes? What if they could help and use their virtue? What if they could start ministering? They could start, you know, uh, helping them in their own suffering and pain. They're doing good work. So every single um, smile from these eyes that they are serving, that is a good source of information that tells them you have worth after all. There's something good in you after all. By the way, our sense of goodness in us is broken once we are exposed to this kind of pains, losing our confidence in our sense of worth. But we tend to gather information, make use of this information with the good deeds we do and the acts that we do towards others. These are good source of information. It feels like, it gives you a sense of feeling and a sense of feeling of worth, a sense of purpose and significance. But once you take that away, you're back staring at this mirror, wondering if you do have worth. So naturally, you would, people tends to gravitate towards a particular mask that, one, hide their flaws, and two, give them a good source of information about that they can use in terms of building up their sense of worth and significance. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And while you're speaking there, what comes to mind, I mean, while you're clarifying, what comes to mind is the fact that often um, those who come alongside others, those who minister to others, um, are often ministering or attempting to minister to themselves. Um, and that's part of the mask that we're talking about here, whether it's subconscious or conscious. Often um, we see in others the pain that we have experienced ourselves, and in ministering to them, we're often trying to minister to ourselves. We're trying to soothe ourselves, or we're trying to make sure they don't go through what we went through. Um, and I see problems with that. Not the least of which is that by ministering to myself, I'm really not holding the space for them. I'm holding the space for myself. And this is where
The-
self-awareness comes in. I need to
exactly.
make sure that I mean my pain that I have experienced, my loss of innocent freedom that you talk about in the book it's not going to go away. The pain, the triggers, I should say, the triggers are not going to go away. Um, but as Daniel Goleman says in his work on emotional intelligence, our triggers never go away. It's how we deal with them that's important. And again, this is where self-awareness comes in, understanding um, where my pain
Yeah,
is, where my wounds are, um,
exactly, Jerry.
to make sure that I'm not ministering to myself as I talk with others.
Yeah, I mean that is the agenda. And the awareness of a particular pastor, for example, when finally he was given a role, and the expectation is to be, the savior, if you may. I mean, we have this messiah complex, naturally embraced by pastors and ministers, because the role implies that, minister, the role implies that you're there for others. It's a beautiful virtue. Now, if this role and the deeds attached to this role, and the space and the time given to you to finally demonstrate and exhibit, how this virtue is going to take place, and that the shining glory of this virtue being embraced by the culture and by the community. If you are a minister, the color, the status, the respect that is out there, it's quite attractive to many wounded individuals, who has no sense of worth outside the role. In fact, if you remove the role, it is very hard for individuals to enjoy relationship with others, because in the context of their own wounding, they never loved unconditionally, or never experience. They were loved unconditionally, as as a child, maybe, when we were born. We have this innocent freedom to say, hey, you know what, I do matter, I deserve love, give me your warmth, give me food, change my diaper. I mean, the audacity of a child, is just there. But as they encounter this imperfect world and get experience the wounding experiences, now they lost the confidence in self and others. So as they find their sense of worth, as they find their sense of significance and connection, living in a world that in their mind as they grow, there's no such thing as unconditional love, especially if they come from a broken home, that whose language is, I can only love you if you do this or do that, or you don't have worth unless you achieve this and achieve that. So they would use the same language in entering the ministry without knowing, and this is the lack of awareness, because sometimes this is just given to many pastors, you know even in with the form of ordination. So and they were elevated to a certain position of service and ministry. But it's a good source of information to somewhat numb or heal, on a surface level, what they felt about themselves. So if this is a good source of healing, why not protect it? If I can be loved, and many pastors, they don't have a problem in being loved as long as they are inside the role. One, the role somehow demands that kind of respect. Two, they are protected by the role, But you remove that role, even if unconditional love is available, if you remove that role, if they are coming from wounding and traumatic experience that says, unless you do this, you won't be loved, then they would not know what to do with unconditional love. that the tendency really is just to go back again to the roles that they learn to wear and embrace.
Well, that's that's why why we as chaplains, um, we often have this feeling again, even if it's subconscious, that we need to make sure that we need to be the one bringing the healing to the patient, to the person, to the wounded, um, and that's because our inner struggles were so strong, that by golly, I'm going to heal them. You used the phrase, or well, yeah, the phrase, healing on the surface just a moment ago. And uh, I think you were, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you were trying to clarify the fact that um, not necessarily that there are different types of healing, but that there is a difference between healing and curing. And I'm wondering if you can help us
Yes.
understand that.
Yeah, I use the word healing on the surface, but maybe curing is a better definition. Let's differentiate curing and healing. Um, in my CP experience, the first time I encountered a difference is from my CP supervisor who said, "You know what? Cancer patients, for example, you will encounter," he told me, "you will encounter a number of patients here who might be cured but not healed. And you will encounter a number of patients here who are healed, although they are not cured." So, to me, cure is very specific, especially in the healthcare model. The priority in the healthcare industry is your biophysical challenges. Okay. Now, once they put back the structure, together, and now you're free to maybe address some of the psycho-emotional challenges and illness that you are facing. But that's just the healthcare model. I mean, the cure is to make sure biophysically you're functioning. The structure is, if there is needs to be restructured, or whatever broken, the the words that we're using in this podcast, um, in the healthcare culture and industry, the main goal is to make sure you're healthy. And by the definition, although many um, facilities and centers nowadays are saying our approach is holistic, but it's still the main goal is to address symptoms, manage them, and maybe help you become functional again. And these are centered on your biophysical um, health and qualities. And then, to me, that's curing. That's curing. So a patient might have successfully overcome certain kinds of illnesses with the help of science and with the help of the medications and everything that they might need in their healthcare program. But doesn't necessarily mean that they are healed. You see people who are still struggling and grappling with their relationship with their dads, with their mom, with their siblings, with their friends, feeling isolated, you know. And some of them are staying alive not because of, the cure that they're getting, but just to hold onto their grudges. They seem cured, but very, very broken as far as healing in relationship is concerned. Relationship with self, relationship with others, and relationship with God. The brokenness is just so um, poignant that you can't just ignore it.
Um, Often it is difficult to ignore, especially if we see our own woundedness in there. But you talk about um, the person who's experiencing this. Um, a very important question that people new to the Kintsugi process might ask is, Um, how do I, as a um, resilience mentor, help somebody in this particular type of journey where they are, as you described there, no matter what, they're still within this um, wounded sphere.
Sure. It's a very important question. This is the model, I always present to our Kintsugi resilience trainees. As you deliver the process, and we learn this in chaplaincy, that this is very important. These are foundational in our CPE training program, and we use the same kind of foundation in Kintsugi. First is you are there to hold the space, and the model that we would like to embrace there is the pastoral care image of midwifing. Okay, midwifing is also it's a good picture of holding a space so that birthing process could happen. But holding space is just it's more than making things happen. Holding a space is also providing communion and companionship. You said coming alongside is a good way of describing it. In this phase of doing kintsugi process, you are not presenting a hierarchical relationship with the person that you are trying to help or to mentor, if you may. We use the word mentor here because we are in the CPE model. Even the word mentor, mentor mentee relationship, we try to make sure that there is an experience of communion where human to human, broken one broken person to another, you understand the journey, you could relate, you could empathize, you can come alongside. So that's the holding space. And by holding the space and birthing one story, the data that that you've been looking for, once it's birth, and the same goal in any other talk therapy is to get the data come out without forcing it, you know because it's very important that the delivery of the data, it's intertwined with the person. Okay, that's why we don't do interrogative interview in this process. We just allow the person to have their narrative come to the open. Once we have the data, once we have the story, if you may, if the story is birth, this is the next phase of doing kintsugi with others. We use mirrors. We hold up mirrors so that they could reflect and see and understand and encounter oneself. So they give birth to this story, but the story is a reflection of themselves. And we're holding up the mirror, and with the skill set that our Kintsugi resilience practitioner have, is to highlight, by just holding up a mirror, highlight what they might be avoiding for quite some time, in terms of their encounter with oneself. And sometimes that's a painful process. And sometimes that's a eureka moment, a aha moment. And sometimes that's a hurtful and painful moment. So the next phase there is after that process of holding up a mirror and the awareness is happening and the realization is happening, but it could be very difficult. So then the next phase, the third phase, is another word, hold, but this time you keep on holding hands together, because it could be a very dark valley that they're going through as they take you to their world. I mean, when you hold the space, they birth the story. What if the story is a story of pain and suffering? You don't just hold up a mirror. You also continue to provide the companionship so that they can walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Um, and that's how I present kintsugi process, if you may. The client is there to birth their story in different forms and ways so that they can encounter self and encounter maybe not only just the self itself, but the lens that they use in in understanding self. And that could be a very scary process. But this companionship and this birthing metaphor is what we do in Kintsugi process.
Well, I like the word companionship here, and I like your imagery of walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Well, all of us, we have some sort of valley that we're walking through, the shadow of something. Um, and I like to help people understand that as we walk through this, we don't want to be carrying a flashlight to point the way out of this valley, but rather we want to walk with them in the darkness. And you talked earlier about this mirror, about a mirror versus, well, not versus, but the first step is to hold the space. And I think you did a great job of explaining what holding the space means. But for our viewers who might not be so familiar with the concept of holding a mirror, um, I'm wondering if you can give us some examples of what it means to hold a mirror in this context.
Sure, sure. Part of the level of toxicity we experience as wounded individuals is we tend to shape our narrative to protect oneself, and sometimes we use fantasies, you know so we could live more in the fantasy than experience the pain and suffering in our realities. And sometimes, because a big part of the Kintsugi process is going back to your life story. Um, what if your life story is so painful and messed up? Um, you tend to tell your story based on just like a resume. I work here, I work there, I went to school here, went to school there. You know, that's it. That's my story. You don't want to go to places where it's painful. Now,
Right.
why it's important in the kintsugi process to hold up a mirror, and maybe before holding up a mirror, holding the space so that the person can take you to places that they themselves don't want to go to. And this is not about forcing the individual. Okay, the individual will take you to places that they're willing and ready to go
Right.
with a small piece of information that they gave you. There is always the experience. It's not just the data, the subtext. The subtext speaks volume. Tears, choke, fear, when you hear a story. And there's meaning to that. Why it is important for the Kintsugi resilience practitioner to understand, or at least to sense that fear or sense that emotion and that subtext. Because the story, it lives in the subtext, not just in the text. Now, the art of holding up a mirror is not just reading the text. So when you see the here and the now, the tears, the crack under in their voices, or the anger, whatever emotion, and you hold up a mirror and say, I hear, I hear tears in your voice when you were telling this particular part of your story. Take me there. Help me understand that. I want to, the companionship. Okay. Now, although you are inviting the person to take you there, the fact that you're holding up a mirror, now they're telling the story, not just for you, but they're the story for them because of the mirror that you're holding up. Because there's a reason why they don't want to go there. It's too painful. But part of kintsugi process, I mean, how can you put pieces together, you know, if you are a broken vessel, if you can't confront the brokenness of your life. But in the I mean, the hope down the road is finally you see the golden lacquer that somewhat highlighted by this brokenness. But you can't get to that space without the courage of confronting your own um, broken self, even one step at a time. So holding up a mirror is very important. But what if in the discovery the broken is not actually life itself? What if what's broken is the lens that you use to see life? For example, let's say it's true that you are abused as a child. That's trauma. That's brokenness. But what was broken, it's not just whatever it was broken at that experience as a child, but the lens that you use to see the world, a lens that could no longer trust self and others, a lens that could no longer love self and others, a lens that could no longer believe in the future, believe in your significance or others, confidence in others that they can see your own significance. These are the lenses that are broken. What if in holding up the mirror, the person telling their story realize that what's truly broken is not life itself, but just the lens and that they're using. And that's when holding up a mirror is very, very useful in this process.
Well, that's powerful. That's powerful. Um, we have this lens um, that when we are in our innocent freedom, this is what our world is about. And then it um, as we grow, as we get more experience, more environmental stimulus, that can change. And you call it a broken lens. What happens with people is we often take this, let me call it the bad lens, take a bad lens, take an unhealthy lens, and we walk through life with that unhealthy lens without even realizing it. And often what we do is try to make sure that other people don't see the world through our lens, and that is I mean to say our efforts at making sure that everybody else doesn't experience what we experience. The person who's I want to use the word overly protective. um, I don't really have any examples at the moment, but it might be that an overly protective person is really trying to protect that child within them that received no protection. So the metaphor of a lens is a very powerful one, and I like how you said holding, when you talked about holding a mirror, you weren't saying, look at this right here. I'm telling you who you are. You didn't say that. You were asking gentle questions, saying, that was really, it seemed really painful for you. Take me there. That right there is a mirror. And in looking at that pain, that you've asked them to share with you, um, they have an opportunity to see what they were so afraid to look at, or maybe they didn't even know they were afraid to look at it. But very powerful imagery that you're giving us here, Jeff. Uh, Thank you
Thank you,
for that.
Jerry. Yeah. And I
You
just want to
mentioned
add that,
something. Oh, I'm so sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I just want to add that holding up a mirror is very, very, very useful. But as far as Kintsugi process, so the art of an individual to hold the space so that the story is birth is there. Kintsugi process also have other means to facilitate this birthing process without um, pressuring or forcing the individual participating in this process. We have offered, and these are available to the community, by the way, certain booklets containing very helpful prompts, you know, without providing too much structure. Again, this kintsugi is pattern after CPE. It's not pattern after a chaplain providing uh, pastoral care to someone in crisis, once or twice, two times kind of visit. This is a whole sort of a psychoeducation process patterned after CPE. So we have this material that allow individuals to reflect, do their own thing. Okay, but when they go and share the space with a mentor, um, that's when the difficulty is going to happen. You see, that's when, yeah, I did my assignment, but I can't still go to certain places here. You know, those are the things that I was introducing as far as holding a space and holding up a mirror and holding hands together, because these are difficult, sensitive, and sacred parts of the materials. I'm sorry, you were saying something about my other comment, so
Oh,
we can go back there.
no, 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 no. We got plenty of time to cover this subject and that subject and whatever. You talk about holding space, holding mirror, and holding hands. Um, I just wonder uh, if your community care chaplain logo is an example of holding hands. I mean, it kind of looks like a couple
Yeah,
people praying, sort of. But tell us about
yeah,
that
it's
logo.
yeah, it's hard to really put this just in one single concept. The hope that we can convey through our logo is communion, which is the most important thing in delivering pastoral care, and even in delivering kintsugi process. Communion. Sometimes, and this is what I'm telling my. That's communing. Okay, I hope it conveys. I mean, through through our logo. What I'm when we do our training programs, and this we always remind our trainees: if you miss, if you don't, if you don't feel confident that you did an accurate assessment and provided a very helpful intervention, that's okay, as long as you have provided the kind of communion that your patient or client deserve. And they do deserve communion. And here's why. How many people out there are abandoned, ignored, neglected, dishonored simply by not having someone who is there to listen? If you are one of among those people living in this world, having no one, it's broken. It's not when the relationship is broken, the communication is broken. If you can't, if you know that no one's going to hear you out, you can talk to your parents, for example. You can talk to your loved ones. You can talk to your spouse. You can talk to your daughters or son. You can talk to your brother or sister. And nowadays, the network, it seems big as far as social media is concerned. But in terms of intimate relationship, it's so
All right.
isolated and small. Imagine if you can offer a listening ear and honoring their space. But honoring the space is not just honoring the space, it's honoring the individual. Why? Because the fact that no one was there or is there for them, that means you are. If you are there for them, that means you don't only honor the space, you honor the person. And honoring the person is allowing the person to be heard. So whether in pastoral care or in kintsugi process, the goal is for your client or patient, for them to let them feel understood, to make them feel not alone. The goal is not for you to be successful in delivering and making yourself understood, but to make them feel understood, make them feel heard, make them feel valued, respected, and honored. That's how we restore the sanctity and sacredness of the person who's broken.
Well, I often think that the person the, to whom I'm ministering, their need to feel as though to feel that I'm with them, that I'm listening to them, um, that there's somebody there hearing their story. I think that need is greater than my need to understand what's going on with them. Um, their
Yeah,
need for someone to say, "You matter, and I'm here because you matter." I think that's important, and that's part of what you call communing. And
yeah,
you used the three elements of an encounter of a um, patient encounter, which is communing, assessment, and intervention. The CAI.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
I think that um, well, in place of communing, I will often say connection. Um,
yeah, yeah,
Sometimes I'll say communing and slash connection, but those are very important elements, and I elaborate on them here for those readers who may not understand yet what you had talked about earlier when you talked about communing, assessment, and intervention. And I'd like to add that my students, I think I have kind of an advantage to help them understand or to remember the process, the three letters CAI, because those are the first three letters of my last name. And I tell everybody, if you just remember me, you'll be able to remember the three elements of an encounter. I've tried putting the in like note taking or something like that. That just doesn't work. So I usually just stick with CAI or CAI, yes, communing, assessment, and intervention. And now that I have mentioned that, all that, I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on those three elements real quick.
sure. And I think this is a good note to close our podcast today. Um, in the place where I work, and I also work in a hospital setting, and you know who gets the big bucks, right? People pay, and insurance companies cover if you can pay. Um, Sometimes the reason why you go see a specialist is because you want to know what's going on, and that's assessment, and you want to know how to deal with it, treatment and intervention. So they are very important. That can't be wrong. Okay, and again, because the focus is how to address your biophysical needs, right? But in using a perspective that address holistic, needs. When you say brokenness in our language, it is not just the biophysical brokenness or illness. It is the relationship, the broken relationship with self, broken relationship with others, and broken relationship with God. For example, the meaning of the illness for a 19-year-old athlete. Maybe it's the end. Maybe for them, it's the end of the world. Would I have meaning if I can no longer run or walk or play basketball, or for a 95-year-old who's wondering why she's still alive when the rest of her friends already passed away. There is no sense of vocation. There is no community. there's no quality of life, you know. So the brokenness and the woundedness that these people experience is not limited or is not focused only on the biophysical need. So if you are in the business of pastoral care, providing pastoral care, and even kintsugi process, if you are jumping right away to assess what's going on and thinking of what kind of intervention that you could offer without connection or communion, the good chance of you missing the boat is very, very high. Their story is the key for you to understand exactly what's going on in their life. I mean, talking about assessment. But you just don't get that by interviewing the person just like a journalist or a lawyer or a street interviewer, holding the space and connecting, coming alongside, providing companionship. That's how you get the story in the context of being taken by the path instead of the path taking you. Instead of you taking the path, let the path take you, just like a roller coaster, to experience what they were experiencing at that moment. And by that, you'll have a better sense of what it's like to be in their basement, if you may. What is it like to see how they see the world for a few minutes? It will transform how you conduct your assessment and evaluate your intervention if you could see the world from their lens. CAI,
Beautifully
connect,
said.
assess.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Um, you gave us a little bit of material for future discussions when you talk about um, a broken relationship with God, a broken relationship with others, and a broken relationship with self. Because a broken relationship with God and a broken relationship with others, they can manifest themselves in feelings of guilt, whereas a broken relationship with self will manifest itself as shame. And so here we have a difference between guilt and shame. And again, that'd be great material for future podcasts. Thank you so much
Yes.
for your work
Thank you
today. I
too,
mean,
Jerry.
your
It's a great discussion. Thank you. Appreciate it. Folks, thank you very much for joining us. Um, we'll try our best to keep this going. I hope you can join us next time.
next
Thank
time
you.
on Kintsugi Coffee and Conversation.
There you go. There you go.